Have you ever dreamed of a small town where every love story feels fresh, emotional, and perfectly real? Today, we're joined by Ambar Cordova, who masterfully crafts these worlds in her small town multicultural romances. Listener discretion is advised. This podcast contains mature content intended for adult audiences only. Hello, Amber. I'm so excited to have you on the podcast. If you could start by telling everyone a bit about you and your author journey.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me here. My name is Amber Cordova. I am a romance author. I write mostly small town romances with interracial and multicultural couples. I like to describe my books as relatable, messy, and realistic romance, which very emotional, definitely soon worthy, and with a happy ending, no matter how hard everything is for them through. My debut, The Truth Never Spoken, came out last May in 2024. I actually didn't decide to become an author. It was decided for me. I always love reading. I actually didn't start reading romance until 2020 because during COVID, my town did like a drive-through book swap. So like we would put the books in the mailbox and then you can drive by and pick one, swap one, like the literal library. And you just have to tell the person like, hey, I'm going to pick up a book and stuff like that. And one of my swaps was a romance book and I loved it. And I was like, oh my gosh, these people are going through it and they end up together. I read a lot of lit fic and women's fiction and thrillers. So there was a lot of hardship, but not always there was a happy ending. So I love that about it. And I started devouring books. And in 2023, one of my favorite authors was going to be at a Polycon. And I was like, this sounds like a good idea. And I got a ticket, which I know now that is so hard and people try for years. And it was one of those things that it was like, I'll go to this. And it's funny because JLA always says, I cannot believe your first ever book event was a Polycon because it's like from nothing to like chaos, right? And I found out what like indie authors were. I found out like so many diverse authors and just type of stories because when I became a romance reader, I was reading pretty much the same thing that was like in front of my face, pretty
Right.
much, pretty accessible, whatever was available. And one of the people I met there, Veronica Eden, she lives near me, and she was like, "Let's go do coffee once things settle or whatever." And when we went to have coffee, I had started putting in my notes app like thoughts of writing a story of a couple who looked like me and my husband. And I was just going to put it in my notes app. And when I went to have that coffee with her, my best friend was there too. And my best friend like said it jokingly, hey, she's writing a book. And Veronica was like, oh, tell me about it. And I was like, I am not writing a book. I am writing. I'm like writing thoughts about this fictional couple who looks like me and my husband. Anyway, and she was like, that is a book. And she was like, if you ever want to publish it, just let me know. And I was like, why would I? Who would read it? And she pretty much was like, I would. So I was like, oh, okay. So I got home that day and I told my husband, I was like, hey, so you know this author I went to have coffee with? And he's like, yeah. I was like, she told me I could probably write this. And I've been telling you for years, you should just write your own book. So I did. And here we are a year later, 5 books in, and it's like the missing piece I didn't know was missing. Like I was happy. I had passion for a lot of things, but nothing quite feels like this. Nothing quite feels like putting thoughts that lived in my brain for a long time
Mm.
into paper and creating the stories that have been more than just words on paper. They have been healing for me and others. And it's incredible. And here I am, hooked.
I love that. So I'm curious because I find that with a lot of the discussions we've had on the show, people who are romance readers or who are authors, there was some inkling when they were younger where it was like maybe they wrote a paper in high school or they wrote a story in high school or some poetry. Was there anything like that for you when you were younger that you were like, ooh, like an avid reader or just wanted to write?
I've always been an avid reader to the point where I was 11. My dad's best friend gifted me a copy of a book in English. And he was like, you read so much in Spanish, might as well start learning to read in a second language. My mom is a big reader. So I grew up with like books everywhere. There was a giant library in my house that she had because my mom and my dad were really poor
Mm.
growing up. And in the Dominican, the libraries don't work like they do here. And there are libraries, but there's only a handful of them, and they're all like in the capital. So my mom grew up in a small town in the north. Like there was not such thing as access to books. And the minute she could afford to buy books, that's what she spent her money on. So she started saving them. She had a whole like system in her library that I carried through and I have it in mine. And it was like a thing. And
Mhm.
so I grew up surrounded by books. She read aloud to us until I was in eighth grade. This is something that people are always like, what? I'm like, yeah. And then when I went to high school, then we would read the same books and then we would talk about them, like book club type thing. I did journal a lot. My dad passed when I was 12, and a part of my first, not my first, maybe my third therapist. After I did a lot of like play-based therapy at the beginning, and then eventually I was a teenager and moody and out didn't want to play. And my therapist, one of them, had me journal. So I did do a lot of writing through journal, a lot of like emotional thoughts into paper, like a diary. And in college, I took a creative writing class, not because I wanted to write, but because it was the only elective that had a time that worked for
Yeah.
me. And now I'm like, you know what? Serendipity or the cosmos or something like was aligning the path to make it to where I am now. And my favorite part about creative writing was narrative writing. And as a teacher, I was a teacher for 13 years. Narrative writing was my favorite thing to teach too. So, yes and no. Like, I didn't think publishing was going to be the path, but I've always had that creativity with words. Yeah.
Yeah, that through line. That's so cool. I love that, and I love hearing the story about your mom's library. I'm half Black, half Puerto Rican and Italian, but the Puerto Rican side of my family is, like, the one I grew up with, and I remember my great-grandmother, so my great-great-grandmother passed when I was, like, 9. They lived very long lives,
Hmm.
apparently, and my great-grandmother passed, I don't know, maybe what was it, 10 years ago now? And so when she passed, all of the family members, when my great grandmother passed, all of the girls in the family got some of her books. And so, like, I just love that, and I'm like, I wanna be that person, like, I wanna be the one with, like, all the
Yeah.
and of course, like, I got Outlander and one other one. They're very old versions of it and older books, along with, like, little pieces of jewelry that we got, but that's something that I'm like, "Ugh, I wanna pass all that down," so it just made me think of, like,
Yeah.
with your mom and her collection, right? Just to be able to take that and share it in those memories, I think that's just so beautiful, and the reading aloud. I have 2 kids, they are 11 and 8, but love reading to them at night, or we started doing audiobooks together as well, which has been, like, one, it helps me not have to talk so much when I'm doing that. I was sick for a few months this year with pneumonia, and so that really helped to have some type of thing that I don't have to talk, I can rest my voice, and then they can go ahead and listen to these stories, and yeah, I love just the intimacy of reading together as a family, and I think that it creates such a deeper bond than, like, just sitting there watching TV together.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So she was a big reader. She said that words, you can always have words. I also come from a family when we all speak more than one language. And so it was important for her too to incentivize the linguistic portion of reading too. And I also have two kids, and our kids are the same age, just a year behind. So mine are 10 and 7. And I was just posting on threads last week that my 10-year-old, he's always reading higher than his age, but, like, right now, his reading level is, like, 9th, 10th grade, which is, like, more than the majority of adults, and it's so hard to find things that will still push his reading level with while preserving his innocence, and it's not that he's sheltered. He reads heavy topics, but he doesn't need to be reading anything sexual. He doesn't need to
Right.
be reading anything, like, even oh my gosh, even, like, war, right? Like, he loves historical fiction, and I'm like, "How far is too far? He's only 10." So it's really hard for me to find topics where it's not, yes, they are being a window to other things that he's not involved in, but that are also preserving his innocence because he's only going to be little for so long. And it's so hard. So by reading out loud is one of those things that I have found that I can read things that I might be able to. I'm like, okay, we can skip this part and
Right.
continue. And still, we read The Hunger Games last summer and we haven't read Hamish's book. And he's being like, can we please read it? But I don't know if you've read The Hunger
Haven't,
Games.
but
Oh,
I read Hunger Games when I was, I don't know, maybe 19, I wanna say, is when I read them, just because I was extremely sheltered, like, we were only allowed to read Christian fiction and, like, Amish romance growing up, like, it had to be approved from an approved list, and so I finally got a hold of the Twilight series and
yeah.
Hunger Games when I was 19. But, yes, I have not read the new one, though.
So The Hunger Games, like every time I talk about them, I get like emotional because I read The Hunger Games. It was the first time I read dystopian, and I was like mind blown, right? It also, I don't know, I was in the Dominican. I had traveled to the US my whole life, but vacationing here is very different than living here. And I always thought that I wanted to live here for many reasons, but reading that like apocalyptic, like futuristic thing of this can happen in this first world country or whatever was like, oh, everything in excess is also bad. So I loved it. And then I read it in Spanish, then I read them in English, and then I read like Divergent after, and I loved it too. But I watched the Hunger Game movie, even though they're not as good as the book, obviously, every summer, and they're incredible, but they are heavy.
Yeah.
And he struggles so much with the third book's topics. He would ask me to stop, and we took so long to read it that I'm like, "You're not ready." And he wants to read that Haymitch book so bad. And I'm like, "Boy, my book is so heavy." So I'm like, maybe. So we're reading some happier things right now. So we'll see. But yeah, I love books and the smell of books and the feel of books and getting lost in them. And now that I get to ride them, it's like it's so pinch me moment. I cry almost every day. Just and I'm not like it's people say every day. I'm like, I kid you not. I cry almost every day that this is my life because I just never thought it could be possible. And gosh, I'm very grateful.
I
It's
love
all
it.
I can say.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, that's so good. And yeah, I think that what you're doing and like how you're approaching the different harder topics with your kid is so notable because a lot of, and we're going to have an episode on this eventually, but the idea of like, oh, there should be ratings on books so that parents know what they can or can't. And it's like, well, at that point, you're getting into censorship. That's a whole thing.
Mhm.
Us as parents need to know our child and understand like how they are, what is a maybe trigger for them, how emotional they are. So like for my kids, even my 11-year-old, we haven't seen the Hunger Games or read them because he is an extremely empathetic kid. And so like yeah, we can watch like Marvel movies, okay, people die, but like, he sobs, right? Like when people die in those. And so
Yeah.
like I know that giving him like, "Okay, let's watch this other movie where, like, a bunch of people, kids, die," like, I already know that's gonna be a lot for him, and so it's like, knowing your kid and knowing what can and cannot happen for them at the age that they're at, now I think it's up to us, right, to make that choice for our kids, and so I commend you for navigating that and trying to find things that are still stimulating for your kid while still being true to, okay, he also is just 10, right?
Yeah, yeah, and, it as their mom, I'm the one that is reading the blurbs. I'm the one that is going to Common Sense Media to putting in there and
Yes.
say, okay, let me see what the topics are in here. And then I can go from there. And I was talking to about this like at my release party in June. Like I grew up in a household where like sex wasn't taboo and where like our bodies are our bodies. And I talk about this all the time. I'm like, it's not that we're like nudist, but also like I get dressed in my bedroom. And if my kid comes in, like they're gonna probably see me naked and they know that. So if you are stepping into my bedroom, then you know that you are coming into my personal space and you might see things and it's fine. And they ask questions about like I have scars on my belly from my C-section, from a hysterectomy, from stretch marks. And and they'll be like, "Oh, why is yours black?" And I'm like, "Because I do keloid." So they ask stuff like that. So it's not like that he's not ready to read about human bodies and natural things. Like they know they may not know like sex is what gives you a child, but they know like how the anatomy of a baby being conceived works and stuff like that. But they're not ready to be reading an explicit
Right.
romance. They're 10 and
Right.
7. And even like my 10-year-old, he's more said something the other day. He was like, I really like it's two kids, Charlie and Charlotte, and their siblings. And he was talking about how they're both his good friends for different things. And I was like, what do you mean? And he was like, Charlie, the boy, Charlie is really fun to play with, but Charlotte is really nice to talk to. He's starting to like to differentiate, okay, this feels different than this. So like in a couple years he'll be ready to start reading some YA romance and stuff like that. But right now he wants adventure. He wants to climb a tree.
Yeah.
So it's a fine line to like where do I find things that are still gonna push you
Right.
and your intellect because he reads for fun whatever he wants from what I buy him. But I also have to nourish his vocabulary, his linguistic skills, and his comprehension skills. So it's definitely tricky, but I'm not going to be like, it's the author's job to tell me what
Right.
age this is. No, I'm going to do that because also I don't trust anyone else with my kid's brain.
Right.
No.
Exactly. Yeah, and Common Sense Media is a fantastic place. We do that for a lot of movies because we watch a lot
Mhm.
of movies together as a family, and so, like, my husband's always like, "Can the kids watch this yet?" And I'm like, "I don't know, let's look."
And games are in there
Yeah.
too, which I didn't know because we're not a big video game family. But recently, my son has been somewhat into gaming and he's like, can I please play this? I'm like, let me see what Common Sense Media says. And then I'm like, no, you cannot. Plus, it's 18 plus.
Yeah.
So you can be a little bit older.
Yes. Yeah, and I like
Sorry,
that it
this took like a
right.
whole.
I think as parents, I think that it's so important, right? And so for anyone who's listening, who's also a parent, these are the things
You're
that we're
welcome.
doing. Here are tips and tricks. But yes. All right. So small town. Now we talked about this a little bit beforehand, but to give our listeners a preface for this, when it comes to small towns, especially as women of color, small towns in romance novels tend to be very racist or very white places, right? Either or. Either they're just very white and there's no actual diversity in these small towns, or they are actively racist small towns. Now, you have some very diverse representation in your small towns. Let's get into why you decided to go that route and kind of what you envision from this Baker Oaks kind of small town vibe.
Yeah, absolutely. So I grew up in a city, and when I tell people that I'm from the Dominican, they picture literally like Moana, and I kid you not, to the point where I have people in my real life be like, aren't you? So a couple years ago, I went back home for 6 weeks, and I took my kids, and my neighbor in my small town that I live in said, "Aren't you gonna miss running water?" And I was like, "What? What do you mean?"
Oh, no.
What do you mean? And she was like back home, like in the toilet. And I'm like, okay, so real quick, I was like, let me just show you a quick video of the city I grew up in. And her mind was blown. And that is literally what a lot of these books are, right? So I grew up in Santo Domingo, which is the capital of the Dominican Republic. It is a metropolis. So I like to tell people, imagine Chicago or New York in a little island. Literally what it is. I went to private schools. Like I had access to higher education. The college I went to there is an international college. I can go anywhere on the world and it will transfer. You just pay a fee to get it translated. And then I fell in love with a man from a tiny little town in Florida. He was living in the Dominican Republic when we met. He has all the southern charm with the I don't like to say the wokeness, but with the inclusion mindset and with pretty much he has experienced a lot of things and he moved to the Dominican Republic to go to school. So he is definitely not the traditional Southern small town man that you would imagine. But we did move to the States eventually. And we moved to Jacksonville first, which is a big city. And then we have slowly moved more and more into smaller towns. And I love it. And I really do love it. I am going to say, and I do want to say this because people do picture that I live in a town with one street, with one coffee shop. And somebody told me this because I commented the other day that I wish I had more places where I could walk and go like work, right? Without having to jump in my car. And people were like, but "But don't you have a coffee shop?" I'm like, "I do, but it's not like what you're picturing a small town being. This is
Right.
like acres and acres of houses, and then downtown is somewhere." But in my small town, we have a Target, we have a Walmart, we have Publix, which is the supermarket over here, but we have 2 Publixes, actually. We have 8 pharmacies. We have a TJ Maxx and a Ross, and we don't have a Costco, and we don't have a Trader Joe's, but other than that, we have a lot of things, and Jacksonville is like 10 minutes down the road. So it's not what Baker Oaks is, but I love it. I love the fact that this more slow pace of living. I love the being more in tune with nature. I love the cozy feeling. I love the gossip. I love that everybody knows everybody. Like I just love those things about small town books was what I read the most
Mm.
before I became an author as well. And guess what was lacking? Someone who
Yep.
looked like me, who sounded like me, who was married to someone from the small town. And this is something that I say often. I'm like, it's not that it doesn't exist, it's just that it's rare. And also, it's really hard to find that interracial, multicultural relationship in a small town, honestly. And that's just how Baker Oaks started. And then it has developed into this safe space for people who look like us, for people who are in relationships like mine to find themselves in these beautiful romance stories with a happy ending. And I wanted my kids to see families like their family in a setting to where they live in a positive way with real life problems. And this is where it can get a little bit dicey because I do feel like sometimes reader expect, and not all readers, but a lot of readers expect to learn something from authors of color. Like I'm reading this book not for enjoyment, but because I want to learn about struggles or really whatever. And it's a really fine line for me, particularly with the type of messy stories I write, because my intent is not for you to learn something from them, it's for you to heal with my characters or to kind of offer some perspective of what some of us go through, which sometimes has to deal with race, but sometimes it has to deal with other very big problems, like me not being able to find plantains here.
Right.
And it might sound like something so not important, but it is when something as big as for the Dominican culture as food is. And I'm like, my birthday was last month and my mom was here and she was like, I can't even make you Dominican breakfast because we couldn't find anything. And I'm like, I know.
Yeah.
So things like that. Also, exploring a lot of the things that people go through in small towns because everybody knows everybody. When you add to that, that you may not have been born there. So there's definitely that portion as well. But I love it. I love writing small town. I love writing interconnected everything where everybody knows everybody and you may see this person in this book and they come out 5 books down the road. The found family aspect is it is tighter when you have a place like a small town or like a sports team where everybody's together. And it gave me that like high school vibe with older people, if that makes
Yeah.
sense. And we live here. We are part of these communities and we get to enjoy the same things that people who were maybe born and raised and a lot of people of color were born and raised in these small towns too, and it's important that they see themselves in the pages of books. So that's why I started. And I am staying in the small town because I have a slight obsession with the small town vibe in general. But I love my small town too. I love the small town life. I love my chickens and I love walking outside and like we're moving and the new house is in my same neighborhood. But like I said, neighborhood people are like, "Oh," and I'm like, "It's not a suburbs, okay? It's 2 acres and then another house and but the lady behind us in the new house, it's literally like an acre from my house to her house, but there's no fence from our place and she has no fence in hers. So we were talking and yesterday was like Sunday family dinner and she was like, "Your daughter is very welcome to stay play with her grandkid who goes to school with my kid." And it gives me that like everybody belongs vibe that doesn't necessarily always happen in real life. I
Mm.
do get that in my place, but there is a lot of like ignorance, like my neighbor saying stuff like that, which did lead to me. I had two choices. I either educate her on this or I just be like, well, whatever. But we had just moved here and I was like, we're gonna be neighbors for a while, so might as well take the time to like, offer a window. So like, hey,
Mhm.
this is how I grew up. But it also provides me a mirror too. As much as I have stuff and lived experiences that she doesn't have, she have lived experiences that I don't have. So when I'm like deep cleaning my oven and I don't know how to do it, I go to her and I'm like, hey, can you please show me how to do this? And she's being like, honey, you just need to use some lemon and let me show you. So yeah, so that's I guess a long 10-minute rambling of me telling you why I write small town.
I love it. I've never lived, okay, that's not true. I did live in a small town, but I lived in an apartment complex within a small town. And so, like, I was close to my downstairs neighbor, who were an older couple, but that was pretty much it. And I was 5 minutes from work. So it was literally like drive to work, drive home, and also new mom. And so all of that. And then we moved down south. So that was in New Jersey, which, like, nobody wants to be neighbors to anybody in New Jersey and in the north. So, like, growing up with that vibe. And I was born and raised in Syracuse, New York. So, like, big city. But then now I live like right outside of base, like one of the bases. I'm not military at all, but all my neighbors are military. And so there's a lot of cycling through and stuff like that. And so it's almost a little difficult to get to know my neighbors for extended periods of time. And like we feel like we just got to know the neighbors next to us and then they move, even though they've been here
Mhm,
for 2 years. But just because I'm like, I'm in my house, I'm in my bubble, don't get
mhm.
to really see them. And then even now, my kids are in MMA. And so we go to one that's 5 minutes right up the street. It's very close, probably closer than our Starbucks. That's how close it is. And this over the summer, there's a lot of relocation for a lot of the military families. And so, like, some of the families that were there are no longer there. And so now my kids are going through their, like, oh, my friends are moving away kind of thing. And yeah, it's just been very interesting in like being like, okay, I want to get to become friends with you. Maybe we'll see. How long are you going to be here for?
Yeah, it's hard. And because I grew up in a city, it didn't matter where you lived because if you were going to be friends with someone, you had to have something in common. It was either
Right.
school or like an extracurricular or your parents are friend or something like that. But my husband grew up in, so Baker Oaks is based on the town where my husband grew up in. And literally, like the next door neighbor to his grandparents have been living here since my husband was like 4. So, like, when we had kids, like, we had to go see Mr. Don and show him our kids, and I was like, "Who are these people?" So, it's definitely very different. Like, when I first met my husband, my husband is his grandparents. He has a Greek, a German grandparent from his mom's side, and then from his dad's side, one is from Spain and one is from Italy. So all 4 of his grandparents were immigrants, and then he was born and raised here, but with families that have very strong traditions from their cultures, and so my husband looks very Latino, and his last name is very Latino, and a lot of people are like, "Oh, you look Mexican," your typical comment that he gets, and he's like, "There's 0 Mexican in me." And he's like, "And if anything, Cordova is from Spain." So I feel like because he had to grow up with all that already like racist comments and because they never meant it in a good way or like stereotype, like his view of what the world is was very different than a lot
Mhm.
of his friends. But one of his friends a while ago said something like, "Don't you miss coconuts?" or something. And I was like, How do I explain to you that I don't even like coconut? Like, I don't like, no." So I always try to tell people always, I'm like, like your experience in your small town sometimes is forbidding you from learning about other places that I didn't have that experience because I grew up in a place where we learned about the entire world growing
Right.
up. So I try to bring all of that experience into the small town. And someone recently in another interview said something like, all of your Latino representation, they're all like bougie. And she used a very Dominican word for it too. And she was like, but I want like, you know, the cashier at this supermarket that is like the equivalent to like Walmart here and something like that. And I was like, but that was not my experience. So that's why it was like instant mind blown. She was like, oh my gosh, it's because I'm from this little town and you're from the capital. And I'm
Right.
like, yeah. And when I told her, I'm like, even the school I went to, it was very much, oh my gosh, it's that we've had two very different experiences just in the same country. I'm like, yeah. And that's a tiny ass country. Imagine here, right?
Yeah.
Even my neighbor that didn't know that the Dominican Republic had a city or running water compared to us
It's a
next
moment of
door.
laughter for this.
You know what I
I'm
mean?
sorry.
Where my son, you ask my 10-year-old, and he can talk to you about freaking continents.
Yeah.
So it's definitely eye-opening, but I do try to bring a little bit of all of the experience into my small towns. My small town, though, are very progressive and they're very, actually in one of my books where there is some sort of like racial, it's more of a class
Mm.
clash. It's actually the opposite way. Like the Latino family, they are immigrants because dad is, I actually don't remember. He is, I think he has some sort of embassy job. I could be wrong, but he has some sort of job that, listen,
You're already planning the next
uh,
books. It's fine.
I'm like, I am already writing 6 books after that. So he has some job that he travels for. I think it's with the embassy. So they pretty much have a very like shelter, like upper class vibe, and she falls in love with a country boy. So it's pretty much what are you doing to our family? So it's a little bit of like backwards that when you would expect the person of color. So
Mhm.
it definitely does provide perspective that not everyone's experience is the same, regardless of where you come from. But we do all experience some similar share experiences because of the color of
Right.
our skin and not knowing how to pronounce a word and stuff like that. So I definitely bring that into my stories. And for as long as they live in my brain, they will be coming into paper.
Yes. But I think that how you create your small town is just one, it's based off of experience, right? Like I could not write a small town because I don't really have that experience. And it would be pretty much based off of the small towns I've read, which tend to be very white, which is why I don't read a lot of small town now.
Hmm.
But we were talking earlier in September of 2025. So if you're listening to this in the future, hello, future. But we also have a small town roundup, and it's going to be diverse authors. So we're talking BIPOC authors or LGBTQIA plus authors. You have a few recommendations for some additional
Yeah,
small town
small town.
by BIPOC authors. This is not going to be a comprehensive list, y'all, but if you're looking for more small towns, obviously
Yeah.
read Amber's books first and foremost,
Yes, of
obviously.
course. You have to.
Yes.
Yes. So Brittany Terry writes Small Town too. Not all of her books are like interracial, like mine are, but she does write a lot of interracial romances as well. She is also, I want to say she's black,
Mhm.
but could be mixed. I don't know. Sorry, Brittany, if you are. And I didn't say it. We also have Z. Kaylee Galan, and she writes not only Small Town, but she also writes Cowboy. We have Shade Renee, and she has a Small Town Cowboy series as well. I love all three of these women so much with all my heart, and I love all their stories as well. Let me see. So Lena James, I'm pretty sure she writes Small Town and she's black, but I am not entirely sure because she doesn't promote them as Small Town, which I don't blame her because sometimes, and I have gotten a lot of people have said this to my face. They have said I usually don't read Small Town because it's like the same thing over and over and again. And I'm like, diversify your small towns and
Yeah.
they will be different. I promise. So Danica Nava, she writes Small Town too. She has 2 books out and they're also rom-com. Christina C. Jones. I have not read Christina, but I have heard amazing things about her small town romances. So I definitely want to. Lucy Eden is a black author and she has a couple small town books and I love Lucy with all my heart. And then Danny Trujillo, I also have not read, but she also has a small town with an indigenous couple, maybe. So those are like my usually go to for some diverse small town for sure.
Yeah. And like you were saying, I think that it's important to note that, like, one, if you're trying to diversify your small town, Don't just do it to be like, I want to learn more about the hardships of people of color. There are fiction books that you can read about the real life experiences of people of color and the things that they have gone through. And diversifying your shelf isn't just, oh, I need to check a box, right? No,
Mhm.
I would actually argue that there is more character depth and more depth to the stories by BIPOC authors, but that's just my opinion.
Yeah. And something that I say all the time, like all of my books have hardship in them, one way or another, and none of them so far have to do with race. None of them. And actually, my second book, the biggest hardship, the person who's struggling the most in that book is the white female main character. And my Latino sweetie pie honey bun of a male main character, it's literally just the patient man who's helping her through it. So, yes, there is hardship. And like my last book has a lot of like chronic illness rep and mental health rep. So they're both going through it, to be honest. And that's why that book was so hard for me to write, was because it was a story that needed to be told. Because in this age and time that we are, it's just a lot going on, especially in a small town
Yeah.
in that specific book. But I usually do give my characters a piece of myself. But in this book, I gave both of them a piece of myself, and they were both going through it at the same time. So I had like no peace. Usually there's a character that I'm like, okay, if you're struggling, this character is going to be my safe space. And in this book, there was none of that. So there's definitely, because we are human and we go through things, and a lot of the things we go through don't have to do with like external things that we're experiencing because of our race and because of our ethnicity. A lot of the things are, and a lot of things are genetic. Like Ivy Fairbanks, who is an author who writes disability, she has a book coming out soon in August. Like, I think tomorrow, actually. And I'm really excited for it because her female main character is a Latina character who is a survivor of leukemia.
Mm.
And it was the first time that I saw in an advert, in a like marketing, where she was talking about how leukemia affects Latinas so big, right? And it was so refreshing to see because me and my kids all have a blood disorder that is genetic. And it's not leukemia, thank goodness, but it is pretty dangerous, especially if it goes undiagnosed. And I wasn't diagnosed until my son was diagnosed. So I was a whole adult when I was diagnosed. And it was so refreshing to see a white author writing a character who is out of her lived experience with a condition that is very prominent in that ethnicity without it having to be something racialized. So
Right.
it was like, yes, we are more. Our race, our ethnicity is definitely part of who we are, but that should not be the only reason why you want to learn our stories. And
Right.
I have so many readers who came to me or to my stories because they like the tropes or whatever, and they have stayed because of how seen they have felt in these books. And a lot of them are not people of color. And there is nothing more refreshing to me as an author to be like, oh my gosh, you are seeing yourself in my stories despite of my character's color, because that's what good character development does. And I take so much pride in character development of my stories. And when people are always like, oh, you're braggy, I'm like, I'm not braggy, but I'm confident. And I am
Yeah.
learning so much all the time. And I'm always learning how to make them more layer and more deep and bring more that. But I'm like, but that's my favorite part of the writing process. And I am good at it. So I am always going to talk about that. I'm like, if you want perfect characters, my stories are never going to be for you. If you want characters that are not gonna piss you off, my stories are not it. Like they're not it. And I have one, my rom-coms might be, my Christmas novella from last year, my Christmas novella from this year. Those might be for you if you just want to have a good time. But if you want to connect on a deeper level with characters, if you want characters that you're gonna be like, but you can, but you understand where they're coming from, then yeah, my characters are for you. Miscommunication at all.
Yes. I have to say that's how I read the first book in the Baker Oak series, and that was how I felt about the female main character for half the book. I was like, I want to slap you. Like,
Mhm.
this man is a 10 out of 10, and he still loves you. What are you doing with your life? You want him. What are you doing? You're
I know.
ruining it for both of you.
And sometimes, like with my last book, I don't read reviews anymore, emphasis on the anymore. But with this last book, The Lies Always Told, that story is so messy that a lot of the reviews I'm tagged in have a lot of like, but in it, which I usually try to like stay away from. But this book is one of those that I'm like, but same. Because when people are like, half the time I wanted to punch them both, I'm like, same. Or like somebody was like, for two people so intelligent, they sure as hell don't know how to communicate with each other. And I was like, listen, IQ and EQ are very different. And this is a 21-year-old gifted woman who has never in her life fell in love. Okay. Like her hormones are like all over the place. I'm like, have you met me also? Because I literally cannot, like, anyways, yes. I tell people all the time, I'm like, listen, if you are looking for a good time, I have maybe one recommendation from mine for you. There will be a happy ending, okay? But if you're looking to for growth, if you're looking for depth, if you're looking for emotion and very realistic depiction of romance, then my books are definitely for you. And sometimes you're not in the mood for that, and that is completely fine. And I always have rec for when you just want to have a good time. But I always say that because people are like, "You're so cute," especially when they meet me in person, and I'm like, "You will cry."
And you will thank me for it.
And then you're gonna be like, "What are you doing to me?" Because people do not expect it. And my writing is very, like, conversational. Like, it feels like you're talking to, like, your best friend, and then you don't see it coming, and then you're like, "The fuck just happened?" I'm like, "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry."
Yep.
I have never shy away from telling people how it is. I'm like, "Do not come to me expecting I'm a rom-com because I'm funny, because they are not rom-coms." The Christmas novella is, but
Oh man, I love it. It's this I don't know if it's a trope, but it probably should be idiots
to
to
lovers.
lovers. Like just get it together, y'all.
Yeah, no, there's no. And I do tell this to people sometimes when they do ask me, I'm like, but I'm also the person who met my husband. We spoke. We were talking for 4 hours to the point that we were at a party and the party like empty and there were only three people left by the time a party I hosted. So I didn't even know that people were leaving my house because I was so like enthralled with this man. We went out to dinner that same night, and then he dropped me back off at my house with my friend, and then the next day, he asked for my number. He saved my phone. He saved his number in my phone with a picture of us, and he asked me out the next day, and my reply to his, "Do you wanna do dinner tonight?" was, "I can tell my friend that went with us last night to come too," and he literally had to tell me, "I am trying to ask you out on a date." And I said, "Me?" Because I am okay. So if miscommunication was a person, it is me. So I don't try to, okay? But I'm a very emotional person. And sometimes, so it just translates to my books too. And I never advertise the miscommunication trope because at this point, I'm like, you just need to expect it from me
Yeah.
at this point. Some sort of talk is not going to be the way you want it to be, but it's always going to be true to the characters.
Mm.
So I've made my peace with that.
Yes. And I feel like, okay, like even looking at your first one, like thinking about 2 18-year-olds trying to have a conversation that like, what were you doing when you were 18? Probably not communicating properly whatsoever. So like, it's to be
Yeah.
expected. It is okay. But yeah, it's always interesting to me with the like miscommunication trope, the idiots to lovers. I think friends to lovers tends to be a lot of idiots to lovers just
hmm
because it's like, oh, we're friends. That's what I thought was happening. And I kind of liked you, but I didn't know if you liked me too. It's just-
hmm I know I'm writing a Friends to Lovers right now, and it's literally like we get the first three chapters are her POV, and she is literally like losing it because they're in a forced proximity situation, and she's like, and she doesn't have self-esteem issues. It's more of like why would he want to date me when he can have the world at his hands? And then we get to his point of view, chapter 4, and he's literally like sweating because they're about to sleep in the same bed. And he is so like, I just can't even believe that I'm about to share the same air she's breathing. And I'm like, if y'all can tell each other that you are pretty much in love with each other since you were 6, but also for them, or for a lot of friends to lovers, it's like the friendship is so strong and you see so many of your friends like destroy each other over failed relationships that it's
Yeah.
hard. But I had so many male friends that never ended up being like a love interest for me that it is hard for me to write friends to lovers because I'm like, I couldn't fathom
Mm.
dating any of my male friends. But for this particular couple, it makes sense. So it's happening. But even that, Ali and Jake's story, a lot of people do say like childhood friends to lovers. And I'm like, they were not friends. I'm like, he literally asked her out the first time they talked. But because they were so young,
Mhm.
it felt like a friendship developing. And I was like, okay, cool. I mean, sure. But
Cool.
I know somebody tagged me childhood friends to strangers to lovers trope the other day. And I was like,
They ran in the
I'm the
same
worst at
circles
this.
for like a year, guys. That's it.
I'm like, okay, sure. But so I always say after the book is done, it doesn't belong to me anymore. It belongs to y'all. But it started with a lot of like me just wanting to see myself on page, right? But now every single one of my books is me healing through something that I didn't know needed to be on page. And usually it's not until I'm almost done with the book that I'm like, oh, yes, I wasn't over that. And it is so scary because and I am pretty open about how much like true real things I do explore in my books. I usually talk about it in my author's note. It is still fiction, it is still belonging to the characters, but a lot of the things are lived experience. And actually I don't have a book yet where I have not written lived experience yet. And it's so scary, especially when people destroy it because it is a part of who you are.
Yeah.
But I have learned that it is like a mourning process after I finish a book, and it's a full crash out and I cry, but I have find it so healing through my readers too. And I get sometimes messages from readers being like, I went and got medical help after reading your book because I realized that I needed help.
Mhm.
And if I never published that, would that person ever find that? I had a reader message me, and I don't put that pressure on me. If you heal through my stories, you do. If you somebody told me that this the lies always told, which is literally like the most devastating thing I have ever written in the world, said that it was such a fun time. It's a 10 out of 10, had a great time. And I was like, did you read the same book? But that was her experience with it. It's fine. But somebody messaged me with one of my other books and was like, I'm getting a divorce because of this book. And I was like,
Wow.
okay. And she said, because the
Congrats.
I was like, I don't know what to tell you right now. And she said something that is always gonna stick with me. She said, the ex, who is a narcissistic, abusive soul, she's like, I realized that my husband is like the ex and I deserve a love like the main character. And I just think it's such a high honor to have my words impact somebody's life in that manner, but also impact somebody's life in any way. I have had readers message me pictures of my words inked on their skin. Like that is permanent. Like you are putting my words that live in my brain in your skin. It's just, there is so much healing in the aftermath.
Yes, so good. Amber, this has been so much fun. For people who are like, okay, yes, I need more Amber and I need to read all of her books, please and thank you. Where can people find you, stalk you, etc.?
Yeah, okay. I do have a website, acordovabooks.com. There you can find like my events and stuff like that. Mostly up to date. However, I do live on Instagram. I do live there. My what do you call it? My handle is A Cordova Books. And funny, I used to say A Cordova Books all the time because in my head it's in Spanish, but it's an A Cordova Books. I am very active on Instagram. I am very active on Threads too. I have a Facebook group. It's called Amber's Babes. My name, Amber, spells with two A's, so AMBAR. All of my books are on Kindle Unlimited. So you can find the ebook there. You can find paperbacks wherever books are sold, and you can actually request them to your library as well. Not the ebook, but you can request the paperbacks as well to your library tomorrow, August 12th. If you're seeing, you are going to be listening to this after August 12th. So on August 12th, so for you in the future, the gift rarely given, my one and only rom-com, is releasing in audio. So it will be available in audio as well. And hopefully in 2026, we will get some more Baker Oaks in audio as well. But yeah, I do signing event almost every month. So make sure that you stay tuned with that in case you get to meet me in person. I am really, really cute, really, really fun. And we'll probably cry in person as well. So be warned.
I love it. And we'll have links for all of that in the show notes and the YouTube description for anyone who's doing other things and is like, wait, what was that again? We got you. In the show notes, check those out and those links. And definitely go check out Amber's books if you have not read them already.
Thank you so much for having me.